Global Watch. Yunus regime's political vendetta deepens. Bangladesh crisis. The interim government has now been in power for 9 months, yet Bangladesh remains trapped in a cycle of political turmoil and uncertainty. On one side, political parties are more fragmented than ever before, while on the other, the interim administration continues to struggle with addressing the country's persistent socio-economic and political challenges. Although the interim government was established with broad consensus among civil society, political leaders, and the military following the mass uprising of 2024, the interim government under Muhammad Yunus has faced considerable difficulties since its formation. Indeed, much of the disorder that has engulfed the nation since last August can be attributed to the Yunus administration. While there was initial enthusiasm for a reformed Bangladesh, free from its authoritarian legacy, the interim government has largely proven to be a passive administration, repeatedly mired in controversy. It could be argued that the criticisms directed at the Yunus administration originate from remnants of the deposed Hasina regime. Yunus has secured considerable support from global leaders, thereby legitimizing the interim government and receiving strong endorsement primarily from Western countries in its pursuit of reforms and conduct of elections. Nonetheless, domestically, the legislative initiatives intended to implement reforms have encountered opposition not only from some of the very factions that contributed to the establishment of the interim government but also from international human rights organizations. Key legislative measures include the Cyber Protection Ordinance, amendments to the International Crimes Tribunals Act, and the Anti-Terrorism Act. The state of media freedom in Bangladesh remains deeply concerning, with numerous reports of violence, harassment, censorship, and prosecution of journalists and media outlets. Often these outlets are being accused by the interim government as collaborators with the Awami League, contradicting its commitment to uphold press freedom. The introduction of the Cyber Protection Ordinance, which replaced the contentious Cyber Security Act (CSA), quickly sparked apprehension regarding the government's surveillance practices under the guise of enhancing cybersecurity. Organizations such as Transparency International Bangladesh (TIB) criticized the ordinance for being approved without adequate public consultation and for retaining CSA surveillance provisions, thereby posing a potential threat to media freedom in the future. This development coincided with the interim government's cancellation of press accreditation for 167 journalists and the filing of charges of crimes against humanity against 25 journalists due to their alleged links with the Awami League government, provoking condemnation from human rights groups. Media freedom remains a critical concern, exhibiting patterns reminiscent of the previous administration. The most recent report by the Rights and Risk Analysis Group (RRAG), published on World Press Freedom Day 2025 when Bangladesh ranked 149th out of 180 countries, revealed that in the 8 months under Dr. Yunus' interim government, 640 journalists were targeted. The administration's efforts to suppress media critical of Yunus have involved not only branding them as pro-Awami League but also revoking press accreditations, resorting to violence, and levying criminal charges including money laundering, criminal offenses, and terrorism. Consequently, urgent media reforms demand serious and immediate attention. The amendment of the International Crimes Tribunals Act through an ordinance extended the powers of investigative offices to conduct searches and seize evidence without prior approval from the tribunal. Additionally, the new ordinance authorized the tribunal to freeze and confiscate the assets of the accused. More recently, a second amendment introduced provisions allowing the trial and punishment of organizations for crimes within the tribunal's jurisdiction. In essence, these amendments enhance the tribunal's authority to ban organizations, confiscate their properties, and suspend their registration if found guilty of crimes against humanity. Initially, political parties were included in the ordinance, but this was subsequently removed to avoid political controversy. Nonetheless, these amendments, particularly the second, have attracted significant criticism from human rights organizations such as Human Rights Watch (HRW), which argue that they undermine fundamental human rights. Concerns have been raised that these changes could be exploited as tools for political repression of opposition groups, lacking adequate accountability, thus posing a threat to democratic principles. The ban on the Awami League has only reinforced this skepticism. On the 11th of this month, the interim government approved the draft ordinance of the Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act, introducing a new provision to prohibit activities of individuals or entities involved in terrorism, thereby granting the government extensive powers to regulate political activities. Just one day earlier, the interim government imposed a ban on the activities of the Awami League amid increasing pressure from the Nationalist Communist Party (NCP) and Islamic parties. The ordinance, approved overnight, revised the existing Anti-Terrorism Act of 2009 and was subsequently used on May 12 to officially disband the Awami League, providing a clear indication of arbitrary targeting and suppression without accountability. This action provoked widespread condemnation from foreign governments, international human rights organizations, as well as domestic political leaders and analysts. The systematic targeting of Awami League leaders, activists, and supporters who have faced mob violence over the past 9 months sparked concern and criticism over the interim government's failure to prevent the country's descent into lawlessness. Instead, through the launch of Operation Devil Hunt aimed at curbing mob attacks, the interim government appeared to be settling political scores by arresting a disproportionate number of League sympathizers. The banning of a political party mirrored the authoritarian tactics of the deposed government, now widely labeled fascist, fueling fears of a further erosion of democratic space. Moreover, the interim government's ordinance on enforced disappearance has also faced criticism for lacking public consultation, accountability measures, and failing to address past abuses. Swipe left for next video. The interim government's recent legislative initiatives, presented as reforms, amount to little more than old wine in new bottles. While political parties in Bangladesh remain divided on the issue, international human rights organizations have been unequivocal in their criticism. These measures pose a significant threat to fundamental human freedoms. The interim government's political vendetta has become increasingly apparent, as has the growing shadow of disapproval cast over the Yunus administration. The writer is an author and a columnist. His X handle is Arunanandliv. Views expressed in the above piece are personal and solely those of the author. They do not necessarily reflect News 18's views. Latest blogs.